My name is John Abdulla. I'm the Director of Constituent Product at Oxfam America, and we are a team that oversees our technology specifically for marketing and fundraising and advocacy. So, really the team that is looking after CRM, websites, data infrastructure, as well as tools like engaging networks and others that help us deliver that kind of fundraising experience. I mean, there's an urgency, right? Existential threat, I would say, to our existence. Many organizations, many are making deep cuts, which, we've been spared from in a sort of deep way, but certainly the impact on international development in our work has been significant, to put it mildly. I think we're all doing some soul searching right now, figuring out the role that we can play and what change even looks like. This is such a huge moment for us as a country, and I think even in the world right now, that calls into question a lot of what we've taken for granted the last even couple of decades in terms of the sort of global community and global citizenship and the idea of doing good in the world. I think we're all sort of searching for what that path's going to be, and we're still in it and haven't found necessarily the way out, which is maybe an opportunity, but pretty scary too. I think we really wanted to better understand where our donors are at. And one of the things that we implemented, it's a pretty basic thing, but we implemented it, after the November election, really, a post-donate kind of feedback survey. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because, we really, I think for a lot of nonprofits, there's this feeling of being out of touch, right? Yet again, a big kind of surprise election in this country. And I think we really wanted to try to ground our work more in where our donors are and what they care about and what's motivating them. Now, for us, a big part of that has always been humanitarian response. And what's happening in Gaza right now is by far the thing that has really captivated people's attention and, remains a resonant issue. So that's not necessarily a huge pivot from how we work, but I think really wanting to be better in touch with donors along the way to understand, okay, when are they really upset about the USAID cuts and what's happening? When are they, focused more on a particular humanitarian emergency? So trying to kind of stay in lockstep with them. And in that way, I've seen us be, I think, more sort of nimble. For me, AI has been on my mind a lot. And like many people, I think, it's this sort of shiny thing everybody's talking about. And I try to check myself on whether I'm sort of falling into the sort of zeitgeist of it all. But I really do believe this is a unique moment in our history as humanity. And the gravity of it, I think, hasn't fully set in. And I think people are still in mixed places in terms of, how much they want to focus on this as something that nonprofits should really adopt. But, in my view, this is the direction the world is going in, for better and for worse. And I think there's a lot of risk, a lot of troubling kind of areas where AI could really hurt humanity. But I also, because I've been at this now, 15 years almost at Oxfam, I've seen the sort of rise of social media and all the hope and aspiration behind that and how it's played out. And, from my perspective, I just want to try and get in early and do what we can to steer the ship in a positive direction, or at least, find some areas where that technology right from the beginning can actually support our work. And I do really think there's a ton of possibility there. I think it's going to be a really challenging time for us to help steer that ship in a direction that is positive for humanity. But what's the alternative, right? If we don't do that, we're sort of leaving it to the whims of people in technology and other industries that aren't necessarily incentivized, to make the world a better place. So I think it's here to stay. And I think the gravity of AI and that revolution is massive. It's more than social media. And we see already how social media has dominated the way that we think and the way that we treat each other and connect. So that's my view. I think part of it is suspending some disbelief and trying it, because the barrier to entry is so low. It's not like a technology where you have to get trained on it and really go deep on something before you can start using it. I think people are pretty quickly surprised at how useful it can be in even their day-to-day lives. We all just have come to expect Google as another example of this, right? Very low barrier of entry. It's how you navigate the internet. And I see AI as a new sort of layer for us to navigate information or understand, or I guess, explore information that's available to us. It's sort of like the next level of the internet as a whole, right? So, I mean, when I hear someone who's skeptical, I think there's only so much you can say. I think it's going to take time, but I think showing some examples of how it can actually make your day-to-day work or life better or easier. And not trying to sort of hide or shy away from the risks, right? I mean, it is going to change the way that we think, even thinking about kids and the way that it's being rolled out in schools and how that's already leading to, some real challenges with kids not reading or writing. So with any new technology, I think we have to be honest about the fact that it's going to give us something, it's going to take away. And maybe that isn't the most convincing argument, but, I feel like going in eyes open and sort of getting your hands dirty is probably the best way. If we aren't actually experimenting with it ourselves and working to understand it, then, I mean, there's all the more to be afraid of, because then we've got no one who's kind of looking out for nonprofits and the good work that we're doing. And it's entirely, motivated by for-profits. And I really worry about that already. I mean, again, social media is the example, right? The incentivization to really capitalize on our engagement as the sort of new economy. And it's horrible what it has done to our brain, to our thinking, to independent thought. So I hate to see that happen again with AI. I have to be realistic about how much we can really influence that, but I do feel like we've got to work to understand it so that we can do what we can to navigate that. And I don't know, maybe I'm falling into a trap there, but I'll take the chance. I think when it comes to analysis, AI is pretty incredible. The LLMs, and what they can do with language. So that example I gave earlier of, we collect feedback post-donate. What motivated you to give today? And we asked that question. We have actually surprisingly high response rates. And so that's been a really great gauge for us on, what's motivating people. But to comb through all of that and categorize it obviously would take, just some grunt work of like going in there and doing that work. And rather than take that approach, I've used AI to categorize, and then it's definitely a dialogue, right? I mean, the thing we have to be careful with is because we're using this still in a sort of experimental phase, right? It's all fairly new. We've got to challenge it, and we've got to really go back and forth and try and understand what's happening below the surface. Otherwise, we run the risk of like, okay, it's a confident response, it must be right, and that's not true at all. So having that back and forth and prompting, but I mean, it's amazing what it can do, because then we're able to, in this example, categorize the responses, throw them on a chart, and periodically refresh that data. And then I can go in and, if there's a certain theme that I want to watch, I can then ask questions like, all right, what are people saying about that topic? So I feel like getting us closer to donors and continuing on this, journey of really tailoring what we do to our donors so that we can both get their feedback, but then also deliver a more tailored experience that's going to be supported by AI so that we can, for example, deliver that really custom creative that's like specific to you as a donor and what you're interested in. But we don't need to have, teams and teams of creative people producing all of these various outputs. So I feel like that end-to-end understanding our donors and then generating content that's meaningful to them, I could see it playing a huge role in that work. And I hope it's in a way that supplements, the work of our great staff who are, I think really critical to that whole process, including the data analysts, the folks working on the data architecture, as well as the content. This isn't to replace all of those people, but for nonprofits, like we need this it's like a superpower, to be able to do all of this work on top of what we're doing. I see a lot of opportunity. For us, it's become this like well-honed machine engaging networks where, because we've over the years optimized our forms, we're able to really continue to test and roll out new features, including things like upsells to monthly donations. So we've definitely seen, some good results when it comes to defaulting to a monthly donation, offering an upsell after someone makes a one-time gift. These are things that are fairly basic, but are things that, over time we've kind of figured out the right approach to them so that we're not kind of annoying people, but we're able to really improve the experience. And what's been really neat to see is in that post-donate survey, we ask people to rate, their satisfaction, and we're consistently running 4.7 out of 5. So I think the experience that Engaging Networks delivers and our ability to enhance it while not hurting the donor experience, right, and providing too much of that kind of marketing upsell is really important and has been a good journey, and I think speaks to the agility of that platform.